But that's why there's this midlife crisis, because people have the dream job, they have the perfect partner, or whatever that is, they have the money, and then they're like, I'm still not happy because society has taught me that I'm going to be happy once I get this thing. But if you're not happy now, if you're not happy in the journey, you're not going to be happy there once you get there. There is only the now. Life is the journey. It's not these destination points. It's the journey. And how can we find our innate joy and abundance and aliveness now, no matter what you have? Like, that's the freedom.
My guest today is a friend and a somatic and spiritual life empowerment coach. Through her work, she guides clients to embody their authenticity by integrating wisdom from their trauma and past. In other words, her mission is to empower others to reclaim their uniqueness and share their gifts with the world. Oh, and one more thing. Hi, I'm Dami, and this is the More Than One Story podcast, a space to elevate the multifaceted identities of individuals by empowering them to break out of boxes and recognize that they are more than one story. Come curious, respectful, and ready to think critically. Join me in welcoming Katt Grant. Katt, thank you for coming. Can you describe to me what growing up was like for you?
Diving deep. I love it. And thank you, Dami, for having me on your beautiful podcast. It's such an important theme. I was born in Canada, in British Columbia, the western side, but my family is from South Africa. So I'm the only one in my family not born there. But I left BC when I was 10, moved to Alberta for a couple years, and then New Zealand. And my family lives there, and I moved back to Canada when I was 19. And I've lived and traveled all over the world. So been and lived in many different places.
When did you live together with your family, like all of you under one roof? So you were born in Canada, but they came from South Africa. So what was the experience of you being in the same household like?
Yeah, for sure. And, it's funny because I would have friends come over and they would say, oh, I can't understand your parents' accents.
Oh, South African.
But me living there, I could never hear, I didn't know they had an accent because I lived with them. Yeah. So I couldn't tell they had a different accent to Canadians. And I don't think I really realized that, the difficulties of, my parents immigrating to Canada until later in life, of hearing about their struggles and how, that probably impacted me and my sister. But, around, mental health and winters when you're not used to winters and that type of thing. And I think it was only later on in my life, really looking back and seeing like, okay, yeah, they were struggling and, that impacts family in different ways. But yeah, we lived all together in New Zealand. We moved there together. So it was only when I moved back to Canada at 19 that I've been on my own. So it's been a while now, quite a few years. But I mean, I think it's beautiful living and, living and growing up in different places and getting that perspective, I think, from a young age. So having different cultural perspectives. Of course, as I grow older, I learn so much more even when I visit places and move to places and travel. But I think it's powerful having that experience at a younger age as well.
So with all your experience living with your family and also moving on your own, if you were to think back on all of that and to where you are right now, how would you describe the concept of home? What does it mean to you?
I love this question. I know you've talked a bit about this as well. And I think for me, home is a journey rather than a destination. And I think it's really been a journey of coming back to myself and, finding home within, which I know you talk about. And I think it's like everything else in life. It's, what we look for on the outside, it's actually about finding it on the inside. So when looking for home on the outside, it's kind of this never ending journey where it's actually finding it on the inside and coming home. And I think it just deepens like authenticity. And, for me, it's been around the journey of coming back home to myself and who I am, and knowing that no matter where I am, like I have this feeling of home within me. And that's owning my power, right? And I think it's with all the inner work I've done, it's the same, what we're looking for on the outside. If you want validation from others, okay, where am I not validating myself? How can I validate myself? And then ironically, you don't need it on the outside. So it's the same with home. Okay, searching for home versus actually coming home and finding it within. And it's a journey, I think it's like everything. There's ups and downs, and there's moments that I feel more at home and less at home. But the longer I'm on this journey, the more it's easier for me to remember that home is on the inside, and come back to it. And I'm curious because I know you talk a lot about home within. So how did you come to this, like, it's within? How did you come to that realization?
I feel like it took me a bit longer to get to that realization because I was in hustle mode for a long time. Like when I left Nigeria, I left Nigeria in 2006. So it's been a long time of just like feeling unstable in different countries and trying to find, where do I feel like this is home? And I had a situation whereby when I visited Nigeria in 2015 or so, and I just didn't feel comfortable there. Like I just didn't, like I was just, getting into arguments because of just like not agreeing with different ways of thinking and trying to learn to adapt and remember, and also like having my own view and world views right now as well. And I remember when I got back to Boston, it was like snowing that day when I landed, like at the airport at Logan. And normally, like it's crazy, like it's snowing, it's raining, and it's the worst. But the first thing I said when I stepped out of the airport was, "I'm home." And I thought to myself, I was like, that is so weird. Like, why is Boston home, but Nigeria didn't feel like home to me? But like when I moved to Toronto as well, like I've seen that whole evolution to realize like it's not about the place. Sometimes it's about the people and the connections, the rituals. There's a lot that goes on into that makes it what it is. So in terms of like, I've come to that conclusion, like home is within, like it's really about what you bring out that allows, it's like it's a feeling, it's not a place. So it's what comes out from within to allow that to be fostered, and that feeling to be fostered with people as well. It's been
Yeah.
a
And I
journey.
love
Yeah.
that it's a feeling, not a place. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to describe it. And as you were talking, it's like society conditions us we talk about it as if it's a place. Like, where are you
Right.
from? Where's your home? And like struggling to answer that question because, I don't feel like I'm from any particular place, right? Which I'm sure you can resonate, but we're taught that to look on the outside. And so it's really this journey. And I love how you say feeling. It's a feeling of being home rather than this external.
Exactly. So we know you're a coach, and I would like to also for me to know as well, like talk me through your journey to becoming a coach, and what were you doing before that, or what was your initial plan, or what was the expectation of what you were supposed to do before you transitioned into like made this career swerve. So if you can talk us through that journey towards becoming a coach.
That's a
It
journey.
is a journey.
It's definitely been a journey. And I feel like it ties in perfectly to the last question. I feel like me becoming a coach has been a journey back home to myself, actually, and really finding my purpose and passion. And yeah, coming back to my authenticity and who I am. And that was definitely a journey. I think at a young age, we're expected to know what we want to study in university, even when we don't know, and very much this outside in approach. I studied economics and environmental studies. I went on to do my master's in sustainable development. And, I had a passion for the environment, and there's always been that care there. And I've worked so many different jobs around economics, sustainability, policy, so many different things. When I did my master's degree, social entrepreneurship was a big part of it, and that lit me up. And I think it's really, the universe leaves clues, and it's all about, I realized, following my intuition, and what lights me up takes me to that next step. And social entrepreneurship, I was very excited about. I think I've known for a long time I want to be my own boss, run my own business, have that freedom, flexibility, and creativity to create whatever I want. But it was definitely, so when I moved to Toronto after doing my master's in Germany, it was definitely outside in. I was like, oh, what business can I create that's going to reduce greenhouse gases to the maximum or create the most impact? This outside in versus what's in my heart that really lights me up and is in me. But at the same time, I don't think I was connected to myself enough to know that. And so things had to, and I had a pattern of moving, every 6 months, every year to different places, from university till I moved to Toronto. Actually, I've been here for 5 years. And that was a pattern of me running from going inwards, from not going inwards and doing my inner work. And so that was a pattern, being so busy. Like when I first moved to Toronto, I was writing my master's thesis, starting a business, doing like 3 side hustles, like just craziness, and that was also, yes. And that's like socially normalized, right? That like, oh, the busier, the better. But it's a way of us not going inwards and dealing with what's in. So COVID was a huge, me staying in Toronto was the start of it for me to see my patterns were no longer working for me. And one of them was creating connection. I would always move before I could create really depthful connections. I was very good at like making friends and being very social, but I wasn't good at being vulnerable and actually connecting on a deeper level. So me staying in one place, that's one example of like, oh, this isn't working. Like I'm, there's something not working here. And so that was coming up. It was already starting. And then in COVID, my crazy life really quieted down. I just had one job at the time, and childhood memories started coming back, and some trauma that I was time to process, and for me to look at my life. And I think, the story I told myself was, okay, I'm super privileged. I have white skin. My dad's a doctor. I have nothing to complain about. And yes, I am privileged, but it's yes, I have privilege. And there's things that happen in my childhood, my upbringing, that I needed to look at, and I needed to feel the pain in order to heal from it. And that was the start of my journey of going inwards and recognizing I had pain to heal, and starting therapy and coaching. Getting coaching is what really empowered me to come back to creating the change I want. Therapy was like beautiful awareness, but then I was like stuck in finding problems. And then coaching really empowered me to repattern these patterns and change the way I was showing up and own my power. And then taking courses and programs, and I dove deep into this work because I realized I'd also been looking for freedom on the outside, everything on the outside, and freedom is within me. And that realization and me finding my freedom and connecting to myself and my intuition and my innate power and wisdom. And I think going through a transformation just lit up like, I want to empower others to do this. Like so many of us are looking on the outside for our freedom, and we're conditioned in society. Once you get that job, you'll be happy. Once you get that relationship, and it's the opposite. It's finding it first and creating from this place of abundance. And so I took a year-long coaching program. I dove deep. It was a beautiful program where we got to take ourselves through this huge transformation and learn all these different coaching skills, and then started my coaching business. And that's really my niche, is empowering people to to come back to their authenticity, own their brilliance, who they are, their gifts to share in this world, and feel empowered to step into their purpose and to share their gifts. And I think, yeah, for me, that's really what life is about. Yeah.
Yeah, so you touched on a lot of things. I'm trying to like keep up. I'm like, next time I have to have a notepad and write as I go. But one thing I want to mention, one of the first things you said that I can remember, the idea of multiple truths, like yes and. I feel like the way the world is right now, it's always like people tend to have this binary way of thinking of like it's either this or that. There's no neutrality, there's no gray area. And I like that you touched on that, like you're privileged, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other truths, like there aren't other things that happen in your life. Because I feel like it's very easy for people to say, well, this person has this, they shouldn't complain. But like, as you grow, like as you kind of like progress, like this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you're moving towards self-actualization, there's always things to improve on if you have a growth mindset. So I like the fact that you recognize that, but there's still like that doesn't mean you can't improve or want better for yourself and for your life. And another thing you said, the
Mm-hmm.
idea of freedom, how did you put it? Was it like freedom was within, or was it something like
Yeah, freedom's on the
freedom's on the inside?
inside.
That's so beautiful. I'll need to ponder on that one a little bit more, but I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of it kind of like touches on this idea of like we're actually more powerful than we think we are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to go off of that, like, I think it's so important. I think it's very much an ego trick for us to be like, oh, this person has it worse, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to look at my pain. And it's not about indulging in your pain or feeling sorry for yourself, but in order to heal it, we have to feel it. So in order to become our best selves, we do need to acknowledge everyone's gone through pain. No matter how good and beautiful your life has been, we've all had pain, some type of small t trauma in our upbringings. It's a disservice not only to yourself, but to the world and everyone around you not to acknowledge it. And so that's the first step, is acknowledging it, feeling it, no matter what other people's pain are, like acknowledging your pain, and then you can transform it. And what's the wisdom under that pain? And that's where we find our unique gifts to share with the world. So yeah, so I think it's important, because a lot of people I coach or people I talk to, it's a theme, of like, oh, but I don't want to, other people have it worse, and it's a trick, because it actually just stops us from integrating that pain and moving forwards. And yeah, this freedom on the inside, like, that's really been my journey. I think I see it in parallel to your journey of finding home on the inside, and if, for different people, different terms resonate, but I think there's a lot of parallel to that. And, as I said, going back to society really teaches us to everything's external, finding whatever and you'll be happy. And people, that's why there's this midlife crisis,
Mm-hmm.
because people have the dream job, they have the perfect partner, or whatever that is, they have the money, and then they're like, I'm still not happy, because society has taught me that I'm going to be happy once I get this thing. But if you're not happy now, if you're not happy in the journey, you're not going to be happy there once you get there. There is only the now. Life is the journey. It's not these destination points. It's the journey. And how can we find our innate joy and abundance and aliveness now, no matter what you have? Like, that's the freedom. It's a journey. I have to always remind myself of this, when my business will go up and down like everything else in life. Can I be joyful, just as joyful, when my business is doing well as when my business is doing less well? Because that's my freedom. We can't control things on the outside. Life will go up and down. How can I be with myself through the ups and downs? How can I find this joy inside, knowing that nothing passes? And I catch myself when I'm in an expansive state. I'm like, oh, I just want to live here, I want to stay here, but this will pass.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm in the contraction of doubt, fear, whatever's happening in my life, a hard time, knowing that this will also pass, and what lesson can I learn in this? And that's life. And finding, even when I'm in the contraction or fear and doubt, finding the joy that's in those moments as well, and in between.
Mm-hmm. That's very powerful. It's sort of like this idea of surrender and the power of surrender, and also the power of now. Like, so that I'm trying to touch on a lot of things right now because it's like lots to keep up with. But I feel like I experienced the power of surrender moving from the US to Toronto in 2018 as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this idea of trusting that life is happening for you. Because Tony Robbins talks about it a lot. Like life is happening for you, not to you. And I feel like that was that year, 2017 to 2018, was when I actually got it. Like it stuck. And it was this idea of like, whatever will happen is supposed to happen. There's a level of control that we have, but we also don't have all the control. And one thing that you mentioned about like the fulfillment, despite having everything you think you need on the external and doing things for the perception and the accolades or the praise of other people, there's still that understanding that it still doesn't truly fulfill. And I feel like that's kind of where a spiritual life comes into play. Because we might work on the mental, the physical, the emotional, but there's that component that's still missing. And it's not really about religion. It's like the first guest, we talked about this in depth a little bit about spirituality as well too. And I feel like there's that component it's essential. Whatever that looks like to each person, it's up to them. But I feel like a spiritual component makes a very big difference.
Yeah, and I love you bringing that up. And before I started my inner journey, I wasn't really a spiritual person. I grew up in a family, non-religious family, and through my inner journey, I'm a very spiritual person right now. And it's like I think it's a part of healing and coming back to ourselves and this trust that we're a part of something bigger and that everything we're going, it's like, that thing, like that job you lost that at the time you thought was the worst thing, or that terrible breakup, or that pain. And now years later, you're like, oh, I needed to go through that because life led me in this direction and I wouldn't be here without, and it makes sense. Right. And so I think I love that like surrender you bring to, because knowing that and having this trust in, that we're all connected in a higher power, whether you call that God, source, spirit, universe. Like, I don't think it matters, whatever resonates with you, but having that trust. And so now if you're going through a hard time, like our limited human brains don't know how this fits with the bigger picture, how it empowers us. But if you can look back and see how life is always working out. Life has always worked out for us up until this point. And like, what would it be like to live life? but it has, right? But we have this like, oh, I can't trust this. So what would it be like to live life? Life is always working out for me. How much more freedom is in that, right? Versus, oh, what's going to go wrong, which is just that it's innocent. It's the ego trying to keep us safe. But does it keep us safe, or does it feel contracted and limiting versus this, let me trust and surrender and be? So I'm curious to you, how was your process in finding surrender? And you mentioned it was coming to Toronto and this move. So I'm curious about that.
So it was actually interesting. So this was in 2017 when I just graduated from business school. DJT was president and everything was chaotic at least for non-American citizens. The surrender had to come from me realizing my limitations as a human being. I got an MBA, I had a science background, I had tons of connections in Boston. So like that wasn't even a problem, like everywhere. But despite having all of those external things, the universe was like things were just not working. Like God was like, this isn't it for you. And I couldn't see it at that point. And I was struggling and trying to figure out a way to stay in the US, whether it's like going back to school, get a PhD program. I got into a PhD program. So it was recognizing that there's only so much you can do as an individual. And then at some point, you also have to let go. So one of my mentors at that point, he gave me the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. It's actually one of my favorite books. I've read it like 5 times, but it's something like I go back to it constantly whenever when I'm going through something difficult, because it has this idea of like stepping outside of the situation and not being consumed by it. Like you're an observer observing this, whatever it is that's playing out in front of you, but you're not that situation. You're just observing it. So it goes into in more depth. I would recommend definitely check out the book if you haven't read it yet. But it touched on something that was very interesting because like it helped me see the connection between Christianity, like I'm a Christian, and other faiths as well. Like there's this scripture that talks about the peace that passeth all understanding. So like when it talks about the Holy Spirit and it talks about the power, like when you trust that God is taking care of things, there's a peace that comes in you that you cannot understand it. And for the first time, I experienced what that was like. Like, I've read that scripture over and over again. I didn't get it. You just read it and you're like, okay, cool, piece of understanding. I understood it. And this is how I knew, because everybody around me was panicking. And they were like, oh, you have this much time left in the US. You're going to go back to Nigeria. Aren't you scared? Like, even my pastor's wife was like, aren't you scared? Like, and I was like, of course I'm scared, but I'm at peace. It was the weirdest thing. I got to a point whereby I was like, even if I have to go back to Nigeria, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm at peace with that, because I know that no matter where I go, God will take care of me. And I don't understand how it's going to happen. All I know is that it's going to happen. So that was like my journey to surrender and just trusting that. And then, things worked out. Like, I got into the PhD program. I deferred my admission because I was planning for Canada. And then Canada came a month after that. So like everything just played out in such a way that it was just perfectly laid out. Like, to the point where I felt like, this isn't ordinary. Like, there's miracle, that something is going on here. Like, it's not just ordinary. Like, it played out so well. I even had like 2.5 months left to pack, say goodbye to people before I left, for my visa, like, expired. So that was like my journey. And it kind of grounds you and also helps you like become stronger in your faith and in your trust that it's happened before. So no matter what comes up in the future, I have a point of reference. Like, in fact, I have many points of references that I can go back to and say,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's okay. There was once upon a time that this was way worse than it is right now. So no matter what it is, remember to go back to your source and just surrender and just let go.
Yeah, and I love that story. And there's so much in there,
So
right?
much.
This trust, this surrender, and this flow when we let go, recognizing from our limited human brains that like to
Mm-hmm.
control, and we think we know everything. And, that's such an ego trick of, I need to control everything, versus let me surrender and trust, and how things just lined up. You had 2 months to pack and say goodbye to people. And that happens when we're in alignment and when we follow our intuition from God, universe, source. And there's this like, we're helped on our way
Mm-hmm.
when it's the right thing for us, when we're in alignment and
Exactly.
when we listen to intuition. And it's so powerful because, and like, what a beautiful way to live, being, when I used to be an atheist, of like, I have to do everything on my own. There's no one to help me. And I didn't lean into support from other people either. Like, what a hard way to live life, versus like, I don't have to do this on my own. I just have to follow my intuition and the nudges and allow the universe to support me and and I just need to be open to the opportunities and the possibilities. And, hearing your story, it's like you were at peace within the chaos and everything was fine, right? Like, everything worked out perfectly, and you probably could see these opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have been able to see if you'd been in the I need to control everything mind. And all the suffering you negated by, like, you could have gone through, maybe it could have been the same experience, got to Canada, but with a hell of a lot of suffering and pain and anxiety and fear, or how you did it from this place of peace and surrender. And it's like, that's your choice. That's your freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That's you finding freedom on the inside, that knowing whatever is happening on the outside, you're okay, right? That's your freedom. And what a beautiful way to live life.
Mm-hmm. For
And
sure.
it's hard in the moments. And when we're going through those times, it's
It's
hard.
hard.
Like, I have to remind myself, like, oh, right, stop controlling from the mind,
Mm-hmm.
But the more we do it, and I love how you also touched on, now I have this experience to come back to. And hey, I also have multiple other experiences in my life where it worked out, where I did trust and like this happened, and like really taking note of that. And I think that helps it helps me to trust my intuition as I move forward. It's like, right, when I follow, and I do this on a daily basis right now, I'm going deep into the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual trust. And like, even with my business, I'm like, every morning, like, which cafe do I feel like going to? I listen to my intuition. And the other day, I met someone at a cafe because I followed my intuition and we connected and had a good chat, and just like, oh, like, I point that out to myself. I journal about it. So my trust in my intuition is growing deeper and deeper. And I'm noticing, like, when I stop controlling, my schedule used to be full from top to bottom of like even reading, meditate, like everything was in there. I'm like, oh, there's no space for me to to listen to the nudges from the universe, to follow my intuition, to receive guidance and go. So now my days are so much less structured, and I'm really tapping into the intuition and allowing, like, it doesn't have to be from my mind. There's so much out there, and it's so fun. Like, it's so much more fun to create from this place, and it feels so much more free. And that's all on the inside. Like, nothing on the outside has changed. That's a perspective shift and a shift in our way of being. And that's what I love, to empower people to come back to find our innate wisdom. Like, and I think society teaches us that we need to find the answers on the outside. Listen to how this person tells you to market your business, or listen to this diet plan, or whatever. It's always outside versus like, hey, what's my innate wisdom? What's my intuition? Because we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
So what works for someone doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And we know no one can tell us. And I think but society teaches us to always look on the outside, listen to the doctor, like give away our power to these other people, versus coming back to our inner knowing and following that. And I think it's a powerful shift. And it's a beautiful way to live life. So I love hearing your stories I feel your expansiveness as you're sharing.
I actually wanted to touch a little bit on that, what you said, the last thing. Like, I feel that there is some merit to taking in external, but there needs to be a separation to have a meeting with yourself and ask, okay, I hear this, but what part do I agree with, and what can I discard? Because I always want to, like, my mom used to always say, like, you have to have a teachable spirit. But like when we're growing up as kids, she always used to say that to us, like, always be teachable no matter what. Like, no matter how much you think you know, there's still like something to learn from other people and, like, other sources. And she's always on with her, like, ginger and garlic stuff and everything. But I feel like there's sort of like a balance of, I can take some input, but I also know when to, like, take time away and separate myself and ask, how do I feel? How does it align with my values and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's a really good point. Yeah. Like, there's so much powerful knowledge, and I'm always learning and growing and reading books and podcasts and courses. And absolutely, it's like, yes, and going back to that point, and what resonates, but really coming back and being like, okay, and what doesn't, what excites you, and like following that, what lights you up, what brings you joy, because life isn't meant to be hard and painful. And, these experiences give us wisdom, and they're here for a reason, but also it is meant to be joyful and fun. And when we're in alignment, it's following that joy. And yes, absolutely. Like, learn from others' journey. Like, I've learned so much from other people's journeys and what they've gone through, and always come back and check in. So I love that point. Yeah. It's yes and
exactly. Multiple truths. Yeah. I'm going to shift a little bit to a different topic, still connected to what we were talking about. I want to know a bit more about how you making a career shift to being a coach redefined your relationships. How was it pivotal?
Good question. I think what redefined my relationships was the inner journey of leading up to me becoming a coach. And that was really around me coming back to connecting to myself and what are my values, and honoring myself and my needs, and being more aware of what's my energy when I hang around this person or this group. And is it uplifting or does it drain me? Is it expansive or, contractive? And really becoming much more self-aware. And, I think in my younger days, I was like, yes to everyone. And I would give my energy to anyone and everyone. And I think that was beautiful in many ways. And it didn't leave any space for me. So I'm a lot more, and it's not good, bad, right, wrong. It's more just, does our energy align? And you can be a beautiful person, and maybe it's not an energetic match, or, we're at different places on our journey, and that can align too at points. But it's really been about, so a lot of friendships have ended for me, or, drifted off. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think society again tells us that anything ending is a bad thing and it's a loss. And actually, I think it can be beautiful. I think you can love people from
I
afar
agree.
and have a friendship or a relationship and see that it no longer serves. And I think people come into your life for reasons, seasons, and lifetimes, and there's often people for chapters, and you grow and learn, and then you're no longer aligned. And it's a gift to both of you to allow that to be a separation. And me creating more space has allowed new friendships to evolve, new people who are like, I'm such a different person
Mm-hmm.
than I was a couple years ago, even, you know? And so who I'm energetically aligned with today is very different. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just an evolution in life. And I think with coaching, it's been, yeah, I think something for me, it's like I love depth. I
Mm-hmm.
love depth in my relationships. And so that's something I seek. And I recognize I also have friends who are, fitness friends, and there's less depth, and that's okay too. There's a range of people in your life, but my close friends, like I love friends I can have these types of conversations with and to connect on a deeper level and support me and I support them and inspire each other,
Mm-hmm.
as I see them step into their dreams and follow their passions, and likewise. And not every friendship has to be like that. There's also like running friends I have, or people on, and I think for me, it's really being intentional and allowing myself to, like, my energy matters. I value myself. I honor myself, and who I give my energy to, who I gift my time
Mm-hmm.
to is a
It
gift.
is.
And that's such a shift, but, and not from a, oh, I'm
Ego, no,
higher
I
or
know.
better.
Yeah.
Not from that, from like, I love myself, and I can give myself fully to those people I choose to. And just like I'm not for everyone, everyone's not for me.
Exactly.
Like, it works both ways. And that's beautiful, right? That's how it is. And noticing, I think for myself, how my alone time is just as important as my connection time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been like, oh, I'm an introvert, so I really need alone time. And something I've really stepped into lately is like, actually, I also really need connection time. Connection is really good for me, but it's the uplifting connection, the connection that has depth and that I feel good. And so seeking that out, but also when I have a Friday night in alone, like enjoying my own company just as much as if I'm out with friends or doing something with friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious how your relationships have evolved over time, and in Toronto maybe compared to Boston in the US,
Yeah.
and with your evolution.
Yeah, it's definitely changed for me as well. Like I would say like the friends that I had when I moved from Boston to Toronto are not the same friends. I still have some of those friends, but not all of them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Like you mentioned too, like it's about your values and your alignment and also like knowing who you are. And because I know who I am right now and I'm still on that journey of continuing to know myself and grow, I know when to take a step away from something. When there's no real alignment on values and where you are in life and how you're growing and moving, not everybody can continue on that journey. And like you mentioned, like there's different chapters to that. But I also noticed that this is something a lot of people struggle with. This idea of belonging, and we all want to connect, we all want to belong, we're humans, but it's also important to not be in the wrong company or have the wrong people around you. I've been really like diving into belonging a lot, like in general, like since I moved here, like trying to navigate my space and my world in Toronto. So I have a quote that I want to read to you from Brene Brown. It's from Braving the Wilderness that I really love, and I feel like
I
it
love that
really
book.
captures it. Yeah, it's an amazing book. So she says true belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are, it requires you to be who you are. And I think it's so
Mm-hmm.
powerful because it's this idea of it's okay to stand alone sometimes and find your tribe. And that takes time. And it took me time when I moved to Toronto as well to just like finding that core group of friends. Like similarly to me, I'm friendly. I can acquaintances are not the same as core friends for me. And that can have loneliness. Like even if you're surrounded by a lot of people, you can still feel lonely. And it's important to find the people that really tap into your spirit. And if I don't feel
Mhm.
that spiritual, not necessarily spiritual in the sense of spiritual, but like I think you mentioned it earlier, if you're not feeling good around a person, pay attention to that because that's your intuition telling you something.
Yeah.
It's helped me build my intuition over time and trust it more and realize that when it's telling you listen to it, there's a reason why it's telling you to do what it's telling you to do. So for me,
Mhm.
because I've come to know myself, I've spent time with myself and worked on myself, I can feel more confident and comfortable saying this is not for me and stepping back from a friendship and not feeling guilty about that because I have to choose myself in the sense of like if you're having to compromise and ignore your values just to keep somebody around, it's not beneficial. It's there's no growth there. It's stagnant. And I'm self-abandoning as well. So I feel like self-abandonment is not just in relationships, like romantic relationships, it's also in friendships. And it's something that I've learned even just like 2 years ago, like people that are not in my life anymore. I've had to go through that. And it's okay. And that's fine. But I'm
Mhm.
choosing myself and coming to that place of recognizing that this is what works for me and their chapter is over and that's it.
I love that. So
Thank
powerful.
you.
And what I hear in that and what I see in you as well is you do own who you authentically are. And the power of that is you then, like some people won't resonate with
Mm-hmm.
you, and that's okay, but you'll attract the people who love you for your exactly who you are,
Exactly.
for your authentic way of being. And I think that's so powerful. And I love how you mentioned that when you spend time with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you enjoy your company, and how you can be, just to add to that, you can be alone and not be lonely, right? Just as much as you said, you can be with
And
people
still be
and still
lonely.
feel
Yeah.
lonely. Yeah. And since you're at this place of, I love spending time with myself, when someone doesn't resonate with you, it's very easy to say no because you're like, I could be by
And I'm
myself and
fine.
having
I'm
way a
fine.
way better time, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's your power, you
Exactly.
know, and I love that quote. Such a beautiful quote. And I've read her book and this belonging
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's something we all yearn for. And again, yeah, belonging to yourself first and foremost, and then, and she says, you can belong everywhere and nowhere
Mm-hmm.
at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. Or I think that's Maya Angelou. And like, yeah, just this sense of, but it's this within. And yeah, your story is powerful and I resonate with so much of it. And it takes time. It
Mm-hmm.
takes time to find your tribe. And as we evolve, friendships and relationships will evolve. But if you're good with you,
That's what's important.
you'll be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I also recognize that this is something a lot of people struggle with in general, just like going solo. Like even solo travel is hard for people, which I get. Like even with me, I take my time to plan it. But if you were to like be comfortable with not being part of a crew, it's fine. But it does take time. So if you were to give advice to our audience, our listeners, as a coach, in terms of like navigating belonging, what would that be? And if you could also touch on, I know I'm asking two questions in one, maybe relate that to how you stay grounded in your new self despite the outside voices. So that can be friends, family,
Hmm.
anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and to navigate belonging, I think it's different depending on where you
Mm-hmm.
are in your attachment style on your journey. Someone who has an anxious attachment style, it's going to be hard. It might be harder to spend time alone, or an extrovert or an introvert. So it's very, there's a lot of variables in there. But I think it's taking those small steps, to what's something you can do by yourself that you enjoy. One person lady I coached, for her it was music.
Mm-hmm.
She hated spending time alone. Had very anxious attachment, and to her alone felt very lonely until she discovered, and she loves music, she's a musician, that when she, rediscovered this creative passion of hers, that spending time but with herself, writing music, playing music, she enjoyed, and that lit her up.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ways do you enjoy spending time with yourself? And I think belonging, it's really deconditioning. Like, what are all those ways society has told you you need to be? Your parents have told you, that you should be, without knowing, but how you should or shouldn't be. All of these, getting slowly peeling back those layers and coming back to who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Who is my authentic self? And owning that, owning who you authentically are, and owning our shadow. I think there's a lot of power in doing shadow work and the parts of us that we judge because society has told us it's not okay. It's not okay to be selfish. Maybe, for example, when you wanted your sister's toy when you were a child, and so anytime your part of you thinks you're selfish, you abandon that part because it's not good. But it's like opening up to all of our parts and seeing the innocence in them, seeing the beauty in them, and that is about coming back to our wholeness. We are already whole. It's just remembering, and it's a journey, but it's a journey of, and I'm still on it. You're still on it, and I feel a sense of belonging to myself, and you do too, from what you've said. And it's never a destination, it's a lifelong journey of like even more growing, even more in belonging to ourselves, coming back. There's even more depths of authenticity, and I reach these pics where I'm like, oh, I'm so much more authentic. And then I'm like, oh, and there's these other parts that I've exiled, or there's this energy aspect of me, and owning, my, that I can feel energy in a very in tune way, and owning these aspects. Like, it just grows, it's this never ending journey. So I think it's really about, being open to do the inner work and loving ourselves and coming back to ourselves in the good and the bad. It's easy to love ourselves when we're doing well in life, when we're places we think we should be, but can you love yourself even when you don't have the body you think you should have, or even when you're, lost that job or aren't where you should be with your career? Like, I think it's all of it. And it's a journey, and it's just one step at a time for wherever you are on that journey, whether that's joining a course, getting a coach, going to therapy, finding a healing community, and just taking those little steps to peel back those layers of conditioning and come back home to yourself and belonging to yourself. Yeah. So that's, and what was the second question?
No worries. I shouldn't have done that. The second one was,
I was like, I knew I'm going to forget
no, it's okay. It's okay. It's basically like trying to if you can share some ways that you stay grounded when there's a lot of voices. So whether it's friends saying, oh, you've changed, or whatever, or like people not approving and things like that, like, or also like, so like the threat of ostracism, or you won't be part of this tribe or whatever. I know a lot of people struggle with that, and it's something that like I've grown in, and I'm still growing in all the time, of just realizing that I actually don't want to be friends with you, so I'm good. So I don't need you to accept me. So if you could share a little bit about your process, and some things you do to come back to your values and remember.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned that. You're like, well, actually, I don't need you. Like, if that's going to be, so that's, but you've gone through your journey to get to that point. And I think a lot of people do struggle with this, especially, clients I coach, and wanting to follow their dream, their passion, but knowing their parents won't approve. And that's something that's like, hard. It's a strong, especially with different cultures. Some cultures, it's even harder to do that. I think for me, it's been about really owning and coming back to, we have one life in this body, and we each have a purpose. We each have gifts to share with the world. And, other people who have shared their gifts have empowered me to step into being a coach, to sharing my gifts, me sharing my gifts. It's like this ripple effect, and really witnessing how when each of us steps into alignment and purpose and shares our gifts, you creating this podcast, it empowers others on their journey, this ripple effect, like that's what changes the world, one human at a time. And that's what matters. And catching the ego will always be there and say, oh, but what if this person judges you? Oh, what will this person think? And that's okay. fear will always be there. Doubt will always be there. It's like embracing these parts of you and being like, okay, what's the wisdom under this? Like, oh, this part just wants me to be successful. This part wants me to be happy. Okay, and questioning that. Will abandoning myself make me happy? Like, or will following my dreams make me happy, and being who I authentically am? And it's just intentional decisions each step of the way. So of course I'm, have these fears or doubts that come up, and it's always, for me, it's about coming back, grounding myself, and like, what's my intuition? What's my inner knowing? Because we always know. And the fear it's like, and through meditation or whatever mindfulness practices work for you, recognizing that these thoughts are there and they're not you. They come and they go. They're not who you are. And who you are is that deeper essence, and coming back to that and then following that and taking the next aligned step and the next aligned step. Seeing the fear, it can be here, but you don't need to live your life by it. And I love what you said earlier in a comment of self-abandonment. And every time we say yes when we want to say no, we spend time with a person we don't want to, whatever it is, I was definitely a people pleaser. That is, no matter how small it is, that's self-abandonment. And that's telling your self-worth, or teaching you unconsciously that you don't value yourself. You value this person above you, and it matters. Even the tiniest decision, you're either training yourself unconsciously that you're worthy or you're not. And it really matters. It really matters, even the tiniest situation. So it's really about honoring ourselves, and it's okay to let someone down. And questioning that, because that's, I think, where we get caught up too, is, are you letting someone down? Like, if I do something but it's really a no, is that actually helping this other person? No. Like, what I witnessed with my people pleasing in relationships is I would please and please and please and please. It would be so uneven, and I co-created that. I wouldn't allow myself to receive. So I take full responsibility in how I co-created those dynamics. And then I would leave one day, because I'd be like, I would reach my limit and I'd be like, this, I am like, this is no longer working. And so, like, is that actually helpful to the other person? No, they've lost me as a friend. That's not good for me. And it's also not good for them. So I really recognize, like, by me honoring myself, it's not only better for me, it's always better for everyone in the long run too. So remembering that. So when you want to please someone, or, think that you're doing your parents good by following their dreams and what they expect of you, or your friends, in the long run, it's never helping anyone to abandon yourself. And when I first started setting boundaries, I would have so much guilt, like, oh, I ended this phone call after 2 hours and maybe my friend's annoyed at me for ending. Like, I had so much guilt over the smallest boundaries. But each time I would recognize, like, oh, how was this a good thing? Okay, now I'm going to want to get on a phone call with this person again because I respected my time. Like, and I really took note of how every time I honored myself, it was good for everyone in the situation. And that really helps me reprogram this guilt around boundaries, this guilt around putting my needs first. And this, like, reprogram, like, it is better for everyone when I honor myself, when I'm my most authentic self, when I, and I think just this deeper spirituality and coming back to, I'm here to share my gifts. That's what lights me up. That's what gives me fulfillment and joy and aliveness. That is, I don't want to be any other way. It's not worth it. My energy and giving my gifts and sharing my gifts with the world is not worth putting someone else's needs before mine, or listening to someone else's judgments, or, and I think when you really get down to that part of your journey, it's like, it's okay if I'm misunderstood. It's okay if someone doesn't like me, because that will happen. And what matters is me, is if I'm honoring myself, if I'm staying true to myself, and I think valuing what I think of me above what anyone else thinks of me.
And also sitting with that discomfort, because it's the sitting with the fact that something as small as the thoughts that go through your head, like, oh my God, the anxiety and everything, we've just been like, no, it's okay. sit with that discomfort and be okay with it. But another angle that I want to throw in there, maybe to like challenge you a little bit, because I'm, born in Nigeria. There's a bit of a cultural difference there. So I agree with everything you said. But also, one thing that I'm trying to learn in my life, and also with my culture, because that's my context, there's times whereby I put my boundaries and say, don't cross it, because I need to be my best self to be this for you. But also knowing when to be a little bit malleable to say, okay, I'm gonna inconvenience myself a little bit. But it's also something that I'm doing because I chose to do it, not because I'm being forced to do it. But also recognizing that, through that cultural lens of like with my parents, like my mom, for example, like I want to show up like my dad before he passed away when he was around, like I want to show up for you in this way because you've gifted me the lessons you've gifted me, the raising me and all of those things. Like it's sort of like my way of giving back and also like being a child and being like their daughter and showing up for them. So it's sort of like something that's ingrained. I know we talked about it very briefly, like recently. Yeah. I want to know what's your thought on that in terms of like when there's that bit of cultural nuance that comes into play of because in Nigeria it's a collectivist society and like a lot of Asian
Mm-hmm.
cultures as well is very I know we have audiences from there as well who might struggle to make that connection because it's like well my culture and not that it's bad or good or like one culture is good and one is bad. It's sort of like it's possible to be both of those things in some way. Yeah, so I want
Mm-hmm. And I love that you brought this up. So thank you. And what I heard in your share is that you're making an intentional
to
choice. You're not abandoning yourself. What I hear is you have some non-negotiables that, hey, these are some things that I need to do to look after my well-being. And I have some things that are in the middle, and you make an intentional choice of giving in this moment. And that's not self-abandonment.
yeah
That's you being taking that pause, being intentional and making a choice and choosing. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that's a beautiful way to live. And I think it's important to know what our non-negotiables are. Like, okay, my mom's staying with me for 6 months is a hard no, maybe, right? Knowing that,
yeah
but like, okay, where can I be flexible? What are my area that is going to be okay? And
right
it's a give and
it's a give and
take. And
take yeah
life is a give and take, and relationships are. But checking in, like, does this feel okay for me? Yes. Okay. So then I can give in. That's really what I heard in your share is this intentionality, checking in with yourself and, being flexible. And maybe one day what a yes is might be a no. Maybe one day your energy's super low. So it's like, I can't pick up that call from my mom because I need to look after myself. Maybe another day your energy's high, so you can give an hour on the phone to your mom, right? So I think it's also these things can change day to day based on how we are and how we need to take care of ourselves. And I love that you bring that in because there is a flexibility and a nuance. And I think it's about that intentionality and choice. Everything is a choice. And I notice for myself, when I make a conscious choice, I always feel good about it. But when I do something like without that pause, and I do it because I'm in my people pleasing pattern, or I don't think about it, then it's those negative impacts around that decision or not making a decision versus that pause and checking in. So I think that's beautiful and what you share, and a beautiful way to be.
yeah thank you. There was a point you mentioned earlier about sharing your gifts with the world. In what ways have you shrunk yourself around other people or in just like shrinking your gifts in general? And how has that served you in the past? And how has it not served you?
Such a good question. I
That's a
love
Louis
it.
question.
So
Yeah.
good. So good. Yeah. I mean, by people pleasing, by putting other people's needs, I used to not think about my needs at all. That wasn't even a concept to me. I had no idea what boundaries were, as I think many people can relate. And it served me because before I was healed, I learned to receive love. I have to help people. I need to give. I need to give all of myself in order to feel loved. So when I was in that pattern, it served me by connecting me to people. That's the way I knew how to love and receive love. And that's how I didn't know and wasn't able to receive other forms of love because I hadn't gone through my own journey. And I did have many different, friendships and relationships, and much more on the surface level than maybe they are now. And I needed to go through, all of that and, really hit rock bottom with self-abandonment, and which led me to this moment of who the am I living my life for? And like, it's not for me. I'm not living my life for me. And having that wake up call to like choose me and to choose me over and over and over again. And I needed to go on that journey of self-abandonment in many forms to reach that low, to really wake up and choose me and honor myself. And of course, I've slipped back into patterns, especially at the start, but choosing me over and over again and recommitting. And on my journey, I stopped drinking alcohol. And that was, me waking up to all the ways that didn't serve me, that was a coping mechanism to much of my life and trauma, and choosing me, and how powerful that choice has been, and choosing myself in relationships and thinking about my energy, and what a beautiful lesson to like really come back to honoring myself. And I needed to go through all of that to be here. And from this place, like I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, and life is a journey, and it really has been. Yeah. And it's tough when you're going through that deep healing. It's tough, but it is worth it. And it's definitely worth all of that.
Yeah. Can you touch on limiting beliefs a little bit to tie in with that question? Yeah. And how that can show up for people and how they can recognize that.
It's hard to recognize them. Like I was not self-aware. And so it was, my coach who started pointing them out to me. And it's really helpful to have others that you trust to catch them and to question them. And still now, I catch a lot of my own, and my coaches still catch them for me. So it's super helpful. But, these limiting beliefs that, to go off my previous example, I have to give in order to receive love, which was an unconscious belief, but it was definitely there. And, I run my clients through like questioning, do you know without a shadow of a doubt that is true? Other than what your mind is telling you, without the constructs of time and anything other than like scientific facts are beliefs. So when we question our beliefs, we just open up to this expansive possibility. And you might question it and you might still, come to the same belief or conclusion. But most of the time you question, you're like, oh, actually, this could also be true. Oh, this friend is selfish, or this friend doesn't care about me because she did X, Y, Z. Catching that belief, questioning it, how could the opposite be true? Well, actually, she cares for me in this way, in this way, in this way. How do I do that to her? How do I not care for her? Okay, well, actually, I do this, this, and this. And, like really opening that and then looking at it. Okay, maybe she was just busy, or maybe I can ask her and have a conversation rather than living my life out of this friend doesn't care about me. And then how do I show up from that belief? Well, I actually reinforce this story. We're always projecting our own beliefs outside. We recreate what we believe. I used to believe the world was unfair, unjust, going in the wrong direction with climate change, studying environmental studies and racism and unjustness and now I don't read the news, and I'm in all these healing communities and coaching communities and podcasts and uplifting and conscious communities. And now my world view is that the world is full of people stepping into higher consciousness and creating beautiful solutions and caring about one another. And now how I see that in the world, because before I would focus on the negative and I saw the negative. What we focus on, we see. And it's nothing has shifted apart from what I allow into my mind and the people I'm around and the communities I'm in. And what do I create in my life from this versus from this very disempowered worldview. And that's the power of beliefs, and really questioning our own, but also being very careful with what we put into our bodies, not just food, but what we read, the information, the communities, because that is what we see the world as, and it makes a huge impact. And what empowers you and what disempowers you, and choosing those things that you feel empowered and expansive in, because my ability to share my gifts with the world is so much more powerful from a place of when I'm feeling free and joyful and uplifted and I believe in the good in the world, than me trying to give my gifts to the world when I'm seeing the world as negative and all these bad things. Like, it's almost impossible. So it's very powerful to question beliefs in relationships, in the world, and we all have them, and seeing our biases and noticing them. And I have I question a lot of my own, and I still have beliefs that come up that my coaches point out, and I'm like, oh, I didn't see it, because sometimes they're unconscious, and that's powerful. It can be a huge shift when we question these. So
yeah, but I also feel like something I want to touch on that you said at the beginning, the space between having awareness, like when you're trying to like catch a limiting belief, the space between having an awareness to acting, there's so much going on in between that. Like you said it right now, like when I've had things and I'm just like trying to navigate something, or it's like, okay, I'm gonna do better next time, or I'm gonna catch this next time. Just having awareness alone is so big, I've realized. Because once you have awareness, then making a choice to counteract that and choose a different behavior, or make a different choice, I feel like that alone is powerful. Just that awareness and being able to like have moments where you can realize, okay, my energy is changing, my emotions are like, I can tell I'm feeling anxious, I'm getting angry or something, or just like I'm scared, that feeling exposed, like something as little as even just like recording this podcast right now. Just like putting yourself out there it's much harder than a lot of people think. Just like doing this, like the exposure, at least for me, I've had that I've struggled with, and we've talked about it as well. But I just wanted to highlight that the importance of just that, something as minor as that is quite big.
Absolutely. Awareness is 70%. Once we see something, we can change it. And change takes time. And when it's really like a big pattern, you've been like, my people pleasing, that took time to change, my pattern of being super critical of myself, that took time to change. But my awareness is 70%. And when it's smaller things, sometimes we can change them right away, but it's noticing each time, oh, there I am in my people pleasing. Okay, what can I do differently next time? Okay, before saying yes, I can just say, let me think about it. Okay, so the next time I show up like that and I give myself that space. Like, yeah, awareness is huge. And as I said, once we see it, we can work with it. It's powerful. So yeah, thank you for making that point.
No worries. For anyone, because I feel like I probably should have asked this at the beginning, some people might be wondering the difference between coaching and therapy. Could you share a little bit about how coaching is important and how it's different from therapy, and also like, how to use both?
Yes, good question. Coaching is going from good to great, and coaching is really around reaching your goals. And I do healing in my coaching, but it's always around a goal, versus therapy is healing from the past, awareness around your patterns, things that have gone on, struggles in your life right now, and doing that deeper healing for the sake of healing work. And there's different modalities of therapy. There's talk therapy, there is somatic therapy, there's so many different types that you can go deeper into. And coaching, and as I said, like I do somatic coaching. That's a huge part of what I do. And for me, it's when I'm working with a client as they're reaching a goal, it's our patterns that, we live out of patterns unconsciously from childhood up until the point we become aware of them, that they no longer serve us, right? So I could have a client that's working towards a goal, and people pleasing comes up as something that's stopping her from reaching her goal. At that point, I would work with that pattern, maybe do somatic healing, unconscious reprogramming. Where does this pattern come from? Do the inner child work around this people pleasing, this deeper healing, so that she can move forwards on her goal in an aligned, authentic, freer way. So that's transformational coaching. Not all coaches are the same. There's a lot of different programs. So transformational coaching is doing this deeper healing work, but always to empower clients, doing healing when it comes up, as clients are working towards their goal, as things are getting towards their goal. And this is when limiting beliefs come up. This is when these unconscious fears come up. And so it's working them at the root so that people can move forwards in an aligned way. And when you work things at the root and do the deeper healing, and then it's like, hey, what's your intuition on the next step? And it's like, okay, maybe I do want to share my story on Instagram, or maybe what feels good is to do this post, but it's coming from like a aligned energy that feels good because you've done the healing work or cleared out these fears, versus let's push through the fear and go out of your comfort zone. And like, that's never sustainable if you're not working with this deeper fear of being seen. Where does this fear come from? Let's go back. Let's do the inner child work to heal it and heal that fear of being seen, and take those next aligned steps that feel good to you. So that's kind of my approach to clients. And it's helpful because you're in action. And I think that's really, when we're in our comfort zone is not when our fears and doubt come up, So when you're in coaching and you're coaching clients to step into their power, create their dreams, create their goals, that's when our limiting beliefs come up, our fears come up, our old patterns come up, because we're expanding our growth edges. So it's like, expect there to be fear. And it's an opportunity. Life is intelligent. Life shows us what we're ready to heal. What do I need to heal? What part of me needs to come forwards as I step into this goal? Because we can't create the next thing from the same level of consciousness or the same level. Who do I need to become? What parts of me need to emerge to go from this 100K business to a million business, or whatever it is, right? Different parts. You need to be a different version of yourself to up level and step into this, and healing and working what's coming up to be healed is a part of that.
Mm-hmm. The last thing you mentioned about you need to be a different version of yourself to step into it, that makes so much sense, because if you're not equipped for something, you can't just fall into it and it happens. Like, you need to be kind of like training for an Olympic.
And not be a different person. So it's more like, if you have a pattern of putting others' needs in front of yourself and you're trying to grow your business, it's like letting go of that. It's your ego. That pattern's not who you are, right? It's like letting go of that pattern that's no longer serving you and stepping into your more authentic self, which is thinking about your needs in the whole of the picture, which will, what I mean? It's all linked. So I think I did say that, like, what other side of you, but really it's like what parts that are already in you and allowing them to emerge and allowing them to come forward.
Kind of like an excavation.
Yes.
Removing things that don't serve you. Well, thank you for the clarification so that people can understand. Because a lot of people have asked, I had someone ask me, like, what is a coach? How is it different from therapy? It's just kind of like recognizing, like, it's that next step, taking an action. Because with me, like, there's times where I've been in therapy and I'm just like, you're telling me what I already know. Like, it's a lot of like, like, therapy is good, but I also feel like at some point I also paired it with coaching, because I needed, okay, what's the next step? What do I actually, like, what action can I take? Like, besides you just listening to my problems, like, I can talk to my friends about my problems, but because I've also done a lot of deep work, I have a lot of like understanding of why this is happening. And sometimes it can feel like, give me more. And then I realized, okay, then you need a coach who will take you to that next level of like, let's outline step 1, step 2. Because it can very like easily, like therapy can very easily feel like you're just venting, but then there is no, like, there's no momentum, there's no movement. So instead of like knowing when to move to the next level or pair it together, that I find, like, at least for it to be more effective, like what you learn is like reading the book and not actually implementing what you've learned. Like, what's the point?
Yes, exactly. So it's really pairing that action. And as you take the next step, it's like, and as you said, like, if there was a fear of being seen around a podcast, coaching, be like, okay, launching that podcast, then what comes up? What's that resistance? What are those things? And working them as you take the next step, as you reach out to people you might have been too shy to reach out to, or whatever that story is, and you being in action and allowing life to bring up the things to then work and be in action and come back to your intuition of what's the next aligned step and what feels good. And for me, that's what was really helpful with coaching, was repatterning being in action to repattern these patterns versus, yes, just talking about it. And I think talk therapy, that's what I did and started with, and it was super helpful for me at the time when I had no self-awareness. And there's different formats of therapy. There is somatic therapy, which is, I think there's so much wisdom and healing in the body, and I think that's super important. But yeah, it was definitely where I felt empowered to create the changes in my life from the awareness was with coaching and with having a container for growth and expanding my growth edges and healing what's coming up and the awareness as you move forward. So
one last question for you. The podcast is called More Than One Story, and the more than one story part is basically to recognize that individuals are multifaceted and they're complex. They're not one story, you're not one thing. And one thing doesn't necessarily mean something external. It could also be internal. So there's an evolution that's happening, process of becoming and changing and shedding and taking on new things. So as you reflect on your journey, Taloje basically translated who are you in Yoruba, which is a Nigerian word. And it ties in with the more than one story, which is like, I am not one thing. What is your Taloje story? What's your more than one story? Based on everything we talked about, how would you summarize that? Or what you would like people to know about you that's hasn't been covered yet?
Yeah, I think just the beauty of the journey of life, and I love that there are so many pieces to each of our lives and so many stories within. We go through everything to journey back home to ourselves, to journey back to our authentic selves, and from that place of then to share our gifts, and our gifts will change and our purpose will evolve over time. And I think the one last thing to say is really about following your joy, what lights you up, what excites you, and knowing when we connect to ourselves and our inner wisdom, there can be so much more ease within the ups and downs of life. There will always be the highs and lows, but how we are with ourselves, we can have that joy, that abundance, that freedom. Discovering that, hearing your stories of how you discovered that, you don't forget that. That's with you, and that's worth the inner work, like finding that freedom on the inside. It's worth doing all of that inner work. So I think that's the last thing to share.
Thank you so much, Katt. Where can people find you?
Yes, absolutely. So my Instagram is Katt, Katt.Grant, and I host some free monthly workshops. So if you're interested in that, look out on my Instagram. I'm busy creating a group program around really empowering people to come back to their authenticity, to own their brilliance, their greatness, connect with their inner wisdom in order to then find and share and own their purpose and gifts in the world. So that's something that I will be launching in a little bit. And if you're interested in my work and coaching, reach out to me. And yeah, it's my purpose is really to empower souls and individuals along their journey to come back home to themselves. And I love doing this work. So yeah, thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, and you're great at it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Dami. Such beautiful, depthful conversations. And I loved hearing your stories as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. I hope you learned something new that can help you, or better still, have gained a new perspective on how to navigate your world. If you enjoyed this discussion, please share it with your friends, follow or subscribe if you haven't, and rate the show wherever you're listening, as this helps others to find the podcast. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this episode. You can do that by responding to the poll question in the episode description section, or comment on the website at www.taloje.com/morethan1story, or on Instagram at Taloje, and that's spelled TALOJE, which is where the More Than One Story podcast is found. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.